All right, there we go. So, hello everyone. I just made it to Denver like literally 1 hour ago, so really happy to have made it here on time. But always really thankful and excited to be presenting along with Livepeer and that team. You know, a lot of the stuff that people are doing with Lens, they're now integrating a lot of cool Livepeer stuff. So hopefully I can speak to a little bit of that, but also just talk about Lens and maybe why I'm excited about it and how it works, so you can kind of understand better. And if you want a Lens handle, we will give you one while you're here. Either today, you can come find me. I will be hanging out, over there, or you can come to the Lens booth. You can use our PO app to, be verified to claim a Lens handle, and also pick out some amazing swag, which is all brand new for this, week. And no one's seen it yet because we haven't brought it out yet, but it'll be here in a couple days. Anyway, so I'm here to talk about the Web3 social stack. My name is Nader. I'm a developer relations engineer. I'm the director of developer relations at AAVE companies. I'm also founder of Developer DAO. I want to first talk about Lens, and then I'm going to talk about, different things about Lens. But first, I want to kind of give a quick introduction. So when you kind of look at our docs, we say it's a composable and decentralized social graph. But to me, that didn't speak exactly to me to understand exactly what it does, but I like to talk about it in this way. It's a protocol and a suite of tools and APIs for easily building social apps or integrating social features into existing apps. So I think that kind of explains how Lens works to the average developer much better than that first introduction. So what are social graph or social applications? When you think of these components, we start realizing that a vast majority of the applications that we use today actually have social features. In fact, if you look at the 4.85 billion people or users of social applications today, it makes up almost all of the internet users, because almost every internet user is using a social app in some way. And what's cool about that is if we can build blockchain and Web3 experiences that are as good or better, then these are user experiences that are easy to understand for the average person, and it's easier to onboard them into other blockchain and other Web3 use cases, because these things will introduce them to wallets and things like that, and then we can kind of introduce them and hopefully gain their interest in stuff like DeFi and things like that. So when you think of a social application, most of them have these same features. You create a profile, you follow other people, you create some type of content, you're able to view a feed of content from the people that you're following, and then often there are recommendation algorithms built in. So, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, all these applications follow this same pattern. So what Lens essentially tries to do is componentize all these different features and allow people to kind of take advantage of an existing software infrastructure instead of having to build all of that themselves from scratch. So therefore, the developers don't actually have to build out that entire back end. It just makes it a lot easier for developers to build because they can focus on the front end. And the result of that is we've seen teams of developers of one that are building out high-quality user experiences on top of the protocol, because you don't need the infrastructure engineers, you don't need the DevOps, you don't need the back-end database engineers, and all these people that you typically would need are no longer necessary because our infrastructure team deals with all that, and the front-end developer is the only one that's really needed to kind of get off the ground. This is very comparable to what we're now seeing in the traditional tech world with serverless infrastructure. You no longer have to kind of build out this entire architecture for sending messaging and messaging infrastructure, right? You just use Twilio. You don't have to build out a database. We have managed databases, DynamoDB, things like that. This is kind of along the same lines, but one level higher, I would say. So I mentioned some examples: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, so on and so forth. So some examples of these types of features would be profile or identity creation and management. So instead of kind of having to implement all of this again from scratch, you might have just an API call that will allow someone to create a profile, fetch that profile, and manage that profile. You might want to have a friend or be able to follow someone. You might be able to want to send them encrypted DMs, and you want to be able to share some type of content to a timeline. These social features can also be standalone outside of a social application, or they can be built as part of a social application. So example of that might be when you're on some news site and you see like a way to leave comments or something like that. So you can think of these mobile and web applications people are building on Lens as either full-on social networks or integrating social features into their existing apps. So with that being said, let's talk about how Lens works. Well, Lens at the core is a set of smart contracts, but what makes Lens what it is and why people are using it is actually the APIs that we've built on top of these smart contracts. We've built a really high quality GraphQL API that allows for easy querying capabilities. So when you think of smart contracts, you're very limited in what you can do as far as reading that data. You have functions that are programmed into your smart contracts, but you can't hit a smart contract with the same queries that you can a database. With a database, you can say things like, give me all of the users who signed up in the last month with the last name D that live in Denver, Colorado, that went to this school. This is a really powerful thing that most applications use on the internet today. But with Web3 applications, when you're reading from a smart contract, you don't have that. So what people end up doing is often building out their own centralized databases, or they might use something like the Graph that allows them to have this querying capability. Well, we've actually built that API and made it available for everyone to use, and we have a lot of different API endpoints that are just ready to roll, and we're adding new stuff all the time. We also have implemented things that make the UX a lot better than the traditional blockchain applications. First of all, the barrier to entry for the average blockchain applications is very high. We want people to go to our application. We want them to go to an exchange, buy the right token, transfer that token to the right wallet. Oh, is my... I might need to charge my computer. I thought that was charging it, maybe it's not. We'll take about 30 seconds and then we'll keep going, and then we can get going again. But anyway, I'm kind of like talking about the typical experience of using a blockchain application is really high, It actually excludes the majority of people in the world. We expect them to do all this onboarding of tokens, and then once they figure out with the right tokens and all of that have the right tokens in the right wallet, we often will expect them to pay to transact on our network. Now, for DeFi applications, for financial applications, this might make a lot of sense, right? Because the security needed for dealing with financial applications is a lot higher. But for the onboarding of the average person into this world, what if instead we could get them to only need to have a wallet and nothing else? Once they have the wallet, they can transact on our application. We subsidize the gas costs because we now have networks that are cheap enough and fast enough and just inexpensive enough for us to be able to treat them as we do treat traditional software infrastructure. Like when we use Twitter, we know that there is an underlying cost for the developers and for the databases and everything that's happening there, but we don't expect the user to pay for a tweet. Instead, we subsidize that in some way. So with Lens, and I think with a lot of the newer applications that we're seeing today in this space with a better user experience, we're seeing the gas cost subsidized. So all someone needs to do to use one of these applications is download a wallet. They can start using it immediately. It opens the door to hundreds of millions of people who literally could never use any of these applications in the past. So beyond that, we also have implemented let me close this. A dispatcher, which allows users to sign a transaction once and never have to sign again for these like non-financial transactions. So you say, okay, I want to allow this application to post on my behalf, comment on my behalf, and things like that. As long as I'm, the person initializing this transaction, I can revoke that at any time. If I want to transact it with any money in any way, obviously this isn't going to work. But if I want to go on Twitter and I want to comment, I want to like, I want to retweet, we shouldn't have to ask the user to sign a transaction every time. So once we've implemented both gasless transactions in this dispatcher, the UX actually feels as good or even better than stuff like Twitter and Instagram. And we have really made a huge focus on developer experience. We have a couple of different SDKs on top of the ability just to use GraphQL. So the average developer that's been using GraphQL in the Web2 space can actually come start building on Lens immediately without having to kind of really pick anything else up. In addition to the GraphQL API, we have a React Hooks SDK that allows you to do stuff like Wagami Hooks does for Ethers, but use that for our APIs. We also have a mobile SDK that's called React Native Lens UI Kit that allows you to kind of get started building mobile apps in as little as 2 lines of code. We just released, and haven't really announced it quite yet, a new widget library for embeds. New widget library for integrations for Lens, features and stuff. So if you want to have a share to Lens button, a sign in with Lens button, or a follow on Lens button, you only need 2 lines of code. By the way, if you do this in your application during ETH Denver Hackathon, you can be eligible for a $1,000 hackathon bounty. We have $10,000 just for integrations. Some of these will only be literally 2 lines of code, so think about that. In addition to that, we also have integrations with other different features that you might not think of when you think of a social application. For instance, XMTP is a protocol for sending encrypted DMs, and it's really, really simple to get up and running with. Has a really nice API. All of the Lens apps that are implementing direct messages are using XMTP, and you can actually pick up XMTP and tap into the entire ecosystem of Lens users by using their namespace. So we have an actually getting started guide in our documentation that's really simple to use, and I would check XMTP out as well. For users that are, I would segment the 2 types of users that Lens focuses on is developers and actual client side, app users and creators. So for developers, one of the things that is really, really compelling is that managed infrastructure. So again, if you're a developer and you don't want to spend $1 million a year for 2 developers to work on your app, you can only have to worry about having a front-end engineer. The back end is already taken care of. You only have to also, you don't actually have to build out and bootstrap your user base from scratch, because Lens already has a built-in user base of over 100,000 users, still in private beta. We're thinking once it opens up to public beta, that will be exponentially larger. But instead of having to kind of start from scratch, you already have this built-in user base. Now, for the composability on the user side, one of the main value props beyond having native payments built in is this idea of a portable social graph. So when I sign up for TikTok and then a new social network comes out 2 years later, I may have gained 100 million users on this one social network, but I'm starting from scratch on this new one. But with Lens, or with any Web3 social, and when I say Lens, I'm working with Lens and I'm a huge fan of it, obviously, but these ideas actually are across all of the Web3 social protocols that are out there. When someone launches a new application, you have a built-in user base on every one of those apps. So all you have to do is download that app, log in. You'll now be like, oh, wow, I have 11,000 followers on this new app. And then when the next app comes out, or I have my 11,000 followers, so on and so forth, Lensta, all of these different ones. So there's dozens of apps that I would consider high quality on Lens, over 100 or so that are out there that are either, still getting to where they need to be, or they're kind of in private production, I guess. So what does the tech stack look like for most of these applications? This is kind of the overall tech stack that you could kind of build almost anything with. We have that Lens API, and then you would need some type of GraphQL client. So most of the time people are using Urkel or Apollo. You could also consider using our React Hooks SDK, which abstracts that GraphQL layer away. It's still in developer preview, but people are starting to use it in production. It will probably go into V1 in the next couple of weeks. For uploading metadata, people are using either IPFS or AAVE. So you need to upload an image or a video or some type of metadata. You can use either one of those. A lot of the applications that are now adding video are using Livepeer. For the client-side interaction with the smart contracts, well, you can use that typical stack that you're probably used to using: WAGMI hooks, WAGMI hooks, Ethers, Rainbow Kit, and similar libraries. For web or mobile, we have a couple of apps being built on mobile on Flutter, a couple on React Native, and then a lot of stuff with things like Next.js. And then XMTP for the encrypted DMs, and you're good to go. You can pretty much implement all of these features like using most of that tech stack. So we are already kind of running a little bit close on time, so I might be already over, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up in the next 3 minutes. So I'm gonna run through some of this stuff, but not all of it. So the major concepts of Lens, there's 2 or 3 that I'm gonna cover. First of all, the profile is kind of like the main component of a Lens user's experience. When you get a Lens handle, this profile kind of represents all of your activity. So when you create a comment or you create a new post or you comment on someone else's post, it's all attached to your profile. And as of today, this profile is essentially just an NFT. So in Web3, you often hear about user data ownership, but I think in reality, you don't really own anything. It's just immutable on the blockchain, right? You create a post, or you create a transaction, you do something, it's on chain. No one can delete it, but you can't actually take it somewhere. You can't do anything with it. So I think NFTs offer a little bit more ownership in the sense that you can burn an NFT, you can sell an NFT, you can transfer an NFT to another wallet. So you have a little bit of control over your profile in that way. With these different components, you have the ability to program your own functionality into them as well. So it would be like if Twitter opened up their infrastructure and allowed you to program your own, your own features into Twitter. So for instance, the main 3 ways that you can do that with Lens are with follow modules, collect modules, and reference modules. A follow module is really just a way for you to say, okay, if someone follows me, all of these different on-chain things can be checked or they can be verified based on that user. So the way people are using this is that you might say, you have to have collected an NFT from me, you might have to have collected this POAP, you might have to be following my friend, you might have to have paid me $1 or whatever you want to say. And then all of these things can kind of be programmed into that follow module. So anything on chain is kind of fair game for these follow modules. The publication is the content creation piece. There are 3 main types of publications: posts, comments, and mirrors. Posts and comments are kind of self-explanatory. A mirror is kind of like a retweet of something like Twitter. We have this idea of a gated publication. So if you create a post, most of the time it's just public, anyone can see it. But if you want to create a private post, you can program in different functionality to let people see that based on who they are. So an example of this, you have to be in developer now. You have to have 1,000 of X tokens. You have to have bought my NFT. You might have subscribed to me as a content creator, something like OnlyFans or something like that. We're seeing stuff like that. So, and then the last one is this idea of a collect module. And this allows anyone to collect any content that's created on Lens as an NFT. And with this collect module, you can program pretty much whatever you want in as well. So a good example of how people are using this, someone posted on Lens, I'm quitting my job, I'm going all in to work on this Lens app, and I want to set the collect price for $2. It's like 2 Matic or something like that. And he made $20-something thousand because he had 10,000 people collect that for $2 each. And when we think of NFTs, we often think of a Bored Ape that's $100,000 that no one can get. But in reality, when you have scale, you don't need to sell things for that expensive. If something's 10 cents or $1, if you have 1 million or 10 million people in your network that can see that thing, you can actually make a decent amount of money by just getting a large number of users to interact with you or engage with you in some way. So I think I'm going to start wrapping it up with some next steps. So if you're a developer, you want to get started on Lens, I would check out the Lens docs at docs.lens.xyz. There's a developer quick start that allows you to get up and running building your first app in about 10 minutes, I think. And then from that, you want to build out more complex functionality. You might want to implement authentication, and we also have a guide for that as well. And then if you have any questions, check out the Lens Discord, and also, create a Lens handle. Like I said, if you don't have a Lens handle, I can allow list you here. And we'd love to see you post your first Hello World on Lens and start creating your following there. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for checking my talk out.